A year from now, you'll wish you started today. I love this quote because it makes me think, why do so many of us wait for someday to change things we already know aren't working? 2025 was a year that shifted so much for me in ways I didn't expect. In both life and business, it surprised me. It resurfaced old wounds, brought some big breakthroughs, and somehow became one of the hardest and most clarifying years in my life. In many ways, 2025 didn't just change me, but set me on an entirely new timeline.
Wow, the last day of 2025. I don't really even know where to begin. I feel like this year was both multiple lifetimes and went by really quickly, you know what I mean? And I know that the intro was a little bit dramatic, but truly, this year felt like one of those years where it put my life and my business on an entirely new timeline. And this year was the year of the snake. And symbolically, it really is a lot about transformation, shedding, introspection, and all of that. And it's not meant to be an easy year. And it totally felt like one of those years for me. I went through some major creative evolution. A lot of childhood trauma was brought to the surface, and I did a lot of healing in that realm. And on this channel, I talk a lot through the lens of my business. But life and business are so intertwined, or at least for me it is. It's in how we create our relationships, our capacity, our energy, our values, our nervous systems. All of it is connected. So I thought I'd reflect on this year with you and share the really hard things that were really beautiful and the lessons I learned and how we can bring all that together and feel really aligned and move it forward into 2026.
Let's talk about 2025. I'll start at the top because January is really where a lot of things changed for me. And so it kind of led to so many other things unfolding throughout the rest of the year. And the first thing was coming into January, I was really, really burned out on social media. And at that time, I wasn't even posting that much anymore, maybe 2, maximum 3 times a week. But I was just feeling so burned out. And I had made a couple of videos at that point too, feeling this conflict with being on social, and this conflict with late stage capitalism and building a business ethically and connecting authentically, and also just not wanting to feed into this big consumerism thing. And so I'd already been wrestling with that. And coming into January, I was just I can't. And coming into 2025, I think I ended up staying off of social media for another 6 weeks coming into 2025. And that felt so good. And the only reason I think I came back on was because I got to go to Iceland and host my first creative retreat. And I didn't even go on, I don't think, leading up to the trip. But I wanted to get back on because, especially with all the people that came on the trip and all of that, I wanted to be able to share photos and almost show that I care about them too on social, if that makes sense. And I hate even saying that out loud because it sounds so performative and there's just so much performing these days and I really hate it, and I don't want to be that person. And not saying that everyone on social media is performing. There's definitely some creators that I really admire and I do feel like are authentic, but the platform itself is really performative. So anyway, that was where I was at. But before I talk about Iceland, 2024 was also my worst financial year of my business since I went full-time. And I've had my business for 8 years, 6 of which were full-time. And reflecting on those numbers, at first I was just so sad. Oh my God, is my business failing? I don't know what I'm doing anymore. What does the future of my business look like? Am I even cut out for this? All the things that are swirling around in your head. But then, of course, I also did my yearly reflections and was whoa, I did so much cool stuff in life. And even though it was the lowest financial year I had, looking at my numbers, I still paid all my bills. I still saved money. I still lived comfortably, and I went on multiple international trips. You know what I mean? So it's even though the numbers weren't up and up and up and up or whatever. I lived really richly in 2024. And so that was a really big kind of aha perspective for me in January too, because I think especially being part of the online world, people are always like flashing their numbers and like doing all this stuff and selling you something based on how successful their business was, whatever. And I was just like, man, I thought I knew what I was doing, but maybe I don't. But then when you take yourself out of that bubble and you like think about what you personally in your life, your circumstances and all of that, what matters to you, what your enough number is, like all of that stuff, who cares like what those people are doing over there? You know what I mean? So that was a really big one. And so this is all January 2025. And then at the end of January, I got to host my first ever creative retreat to Iceland. And it was truly like, I've talked about it so much on here. And if you haven't seen the video, I'll link it here because it was like the real time. You can come on the journey with us. I ended up having 13 women come on this trip with me, which was just so incredible. We were also there during the new moon. So in Iceland, you only get a few hours of daylight per day and the sun never really rises fully. So it's this like epitome of embracing winter and the dark and all of that stuff. So it just felt very magical, mystical in that environment. And being on a trip like that just felt really powerful. And the conversations that we had, like I facilitated a lot of workshops and like mastermind sessions. And I guess I just wasn't expecting it to feel as powerful as it did. And it's one of those things like you can't really describe in words because until you experience something like that, it's hard to explain. And on the trip, a couple of the women were like, have you ever thought about being a business coach? I would love to learn more from you. And in my head at that time, I was like, me? Like, no. And I talked about this in a lot of videos, but that really like sparked this little thing inside that was like, I do know things. And also my mindset around business is not like a lot of the business coach people out there. And I don't really even like using that phrase because there's so much ick around that industry online. But all of that really got the wheels turning and it really led the rest of my year. Getting back from the trip, I got back, I think on February 1st. It was like nothing happened and everything happened at the same time. And I was so fulfilled and exhausted from hosting that trip because you do pour so much energy when you're the host. I was a blob and honestly just kind of processing the experience. Like it took me a couple weeks of processing to even be able to talk about it without crying. And so even scrolling through my photos, I hardly took any photos. I did some skiing, some knitting, like whatever, February things in my business, and really just happily living life off the internet. But that is really where a lot of those shifts started to click for me. But what that really takes me back to is when you create space, when you give yourself that room to breathe and like sink into whatever you experienced or whatever else, that is when integration happens. And I think a lot of us like get caught up in the next, doing more, doing. And we don't let it all sink in and percolate. And sometimes that percolation is hard or uncomfortable. And there's a lot of things from life that we don't want to sit in. But that's really how we process and get through that next phase of our evolution. So then the next few months, like March, April, May, that kind of put me into action mode again. And I loved the Iceland retreat so much that I was like, whoa, what if I was able to get another one put together and host one later in the year? And so I decided to collaborate with my friend and former business coach to host this next retreat. And so we put a lot of work into putting it together and getting it launched really quickly. I also do this thing in my community called dance theater, and it's an annual dance recital. And the theme of the show was metamorphosis. And one of the pieces I was in happened to be the piece that inspired that theme, where we are all moths going through metamorphosis. And I was like, you can't make this up. I feel like I am in this deep process of metamorphosis right now. Everything feels like it needs to shift or change or whatever, and it's really uncomfortable, but I don't really know what that looks like yet. All of that. And this was in March. And if you've been around for a while, you know that April and May are really slow seasons for my business. I have a couple of series called the Slow Season Diaries because this is really where I do all of my annual planning. And for me, because for all these years, my knitting business has been my main focus and most of my sales come in the fall and winter, April and May were really the times when I can plan for that next year. So a couple of really big things happened during this slow season. Oh, hi, Arya. What are you doing? The first was epic failure on the retreat that we had put together and launched. It had been about a month since we launched at the time, and we had only gotten one sign up. And at that point, it was like, okay, do we keep going or do we pivot? And the answer we came to was that we pivot. And I was so sad about it. It felt like total failure, but it also kind of signaled that we needed to pivot. And that's always a really hard thing to discern, right? Like, what is worth your time to keep pushing through versus when do you know to pivot? And I think a lot of that really does come from reflection, comes from, really getting in touch with what you actually want in that vision, looking at the numbers and the data, and then deciding if it's worth your time and energy or not. And no one can really make that decision for you. Like, there's no blueprint for that. There's no strategy or framework that's really going to give you the answer. You kind of have to go through that process yourself and decide. And that's really the key, right? Like, you know what's best for yourself. Like, there can be tools to help you get to that clarity, but ultimately you have to come up with the answer. The next couple of key things that happened during the slow season was we went to South Korea, which was so much fun. And before, when I would make travel vlogs, I would always figure out how to tie it back to business somehow, or like give business lessons in it somehow. And in many ways, yeah, like the traveling is still business related for me because it's like how my business allows me to travel. But for the Korea trip, I was like, I want to try documenting this like one of Anthony Bourdain's style videos. Like, I love Anthony Bourdain. He was such an inspiration to me, and I really wanted to try that out, that style. And so in making that video, did I get a lot of views? No. But it was like a reminder that even though maybe a lot of you come to my channel to see how I run my business, it's okay to not have to tie everything back to that. And so that was a big aha too. And the third big thing is after Korea, we were in Hawaii for my sister-in-law's wedding, and I had signed up for this course. And it was ethical marketing and sales with a radical feminist lens, which I was like, yes. And the reason why I signed up for that was I feel like on this 8-year journey of my business, like I had signed up for one course when I first started, but other than that, like everything was figuring it out on my own. And I do think you learn a lot from just doing and implementing and all of that. And I think coming off of my lowest revenue year, I was like, maybe now in this new market, I actually need to up level those skills. So I signed up for that program, but it did usher me into this phase of like, I want to be a student. I am ready to receive new information and see where that leads. So all of these months since Iceland, I was also hosting these monthly masterminds with the Iceland group. And it was just a way to integrate after the experience. I had guest speakers and really wanted to keep the momentum going. And in some way really wanted to test out what it would look like to host things like this online. And this was when that spark of like, ooh, I want to be a student again really clicked too. And I ended up signing up for my trauma-informed coaching certification. And the reason I wanted to do this was because at that point, I started to get really excited about this prospect of doing some mentorship and helping other women build businesses that are aligned and that didn't follow like the boss babe or like bro culture thing, with people who shared my values and with people who are like, yeah, what we're doing right now isn't working. Like this hustle culture thing, how can we do this another way? And I know for me, and I think for most people, anytime we're feeling stuck or like something's holding us back from being ourselves or doing the thing that you want to do but you keep not doing, it's trauma. And I've had a lot of childhood trauma, and I've been on this healing journey in therapy. This is so important, and this really matters to me. And so I'm like, if I'm going to do any form of coaching, I want to do it with a trauma-informed lens. And not saying you're traumatized, you need coaching, whatever. It's more like we all have experienced trauma in our life, big or small. We've experienced so much collective trauma in the last 8 years, 10 years. And at that point in the year, I was signing petitions left and right, going to protests, like all of this stuff. There's just so much upheaval going on. And it's just like, we all need this type of support. We all need more tools and resources to heal and build a better world, because if we don't heal, we're not going to build a better world. And for me, gaining that knowledge and getting those tools was like, this is something I can do. So we're in the height of summer right now, and in summer in my business, things are really slow. So usually I spend a lot of that time letting myself get out in nature. I plan collections, I take photos, like that kind of thing. So it was a lot of just spending time outside, fun things with friends, outdoor activities, like all of that stuff. And this whole time too, I am internally struggling with identity, going through this evolution, still having a ton of self-doubt and imposter syndrome about the coaching thing. And even having self-doubt about my product stuff, because I was like, I just had one of the lowest revenue years of my business. Who am I to be teaching people anything? And I was really in that most uncomfortable part of pivoting and transformation and all of that stuff. But then a couple of things happened. And I think those are those parts when you're in that hardest part of going through a change, where you start actually finding some forward momentum. So like I said, I was in that program and she holds these office hours, planning like, oh, maybe I'll launch the beta round of this all next year when I'm ready. And she's like, what's stopping you from launching the beta round right now? This is the part where you actually get a lot of information about the direction you want to go, the people you want to help, and they know it's the beta round. They know you're figuring this out. And so I went ahead and launched it, and I ended up getting the max number of clients that I wanted, and I'm truly so grateful for all of the founding first round clients. It's been so much fun working together, and I think a lot of you came from YouTube, which was also like, whoa, like even though my channel is tiny, it's not like I get a ton of views. We're connecting and you're seeing my process. You're like getting to know what I'm about and who I am. And I think that's really what helped me get started on this part of the journey. So I'm very grateful. Thank you for being here. And then the next thing was creative camp. So earlier in the year, when we decided to pivot from the second international retreat, we ended up deciding to do an overnight rafting trip here in Colorado. I have a friend who owns a rafting company, so it ended up working out really well, and they run overnight trips. So it was really nice to be able to partner with them on that. And the river, I love river trips, and the river just has so many beautiful analogies and metaphors for life in general, business. It's so collaborative. It's outside in nature with no one else around when you're rafting overnight. And it was truly such an amazing experience. I wanted this version of the retreat to be more about reconnecting with your inner child, creativity, and just feeling like camp and all of those things. And for the people that came, not everyone wants a business, and this is the same for Iceland. There's people who came that were like, I just want to be around like-minded people who are down to go on an adventure and talk about this stuff. And going into the trip, I was kind of down on myself because not as many people signed up as I was hoping would sign up, but after the experience, I was like, that was exactly what it needed to be. Because it was a smaller, more intimate group, we really got to go deep in things, and just, it changed the experience, if that makes sense. Things unfold in the way they will unfold, and for the people who did come, I'm like, whoa, these people signed up to come with me on this trip. How can I show up for them in the best way? Because they're coming. I don't care about the people who aren't coming. I care about the people who are there. You know what I mean? So it was a great reframe to me. And after running Creative Camp once, I was like, this is something I can do again and improve on and do it again and again. And it's like with anything, the more you do something and improve and iterate, the better it gets. And so last year was really laying a lot of foundations for a lot of things that are going to be the next iteration of it this year. Oh, I barely had my chai. So at this point, we're getting towards fall, and I went on the most amazing trip with my girlfriends. This was just a fun trip. A bunch of us played rugby together, and we went to the Women's Rugby World Cup in England, and then a couple of us went on to go to Slovenia and to Budapest, and it was so fun doing a trip like that. And two really cool things happened on this trip. I mean, a lot of cool things, but the ones that I want to talk about are, the first is that one of the women who came to Iceland, who lives in Switzerland, ended up meeting us in Budapest, which was so fun. We were like, wow, this is like the power of the internet and the positives of the internet, where we got to connect and now have gotten to travel together multiple times. Like, what is this life? And the second thing was, usually when I travel, I bring a lot of yarn, especially this getting into fall season. I normally would have had a whole bag of yarn packed for the plane, for the train rides, like the in-betweens, whatever. And I think I was really inspired by Creative Camp and the whole concept of reconnecting with my inner child, because as kids, it's like you do things because they're fun. It doesn't matter if you're good at them, right? When were we taught to stop doing something because we weren't good at it? You know, like that happened from something else externally. And one of the things I've always really wanted to do was try art journaling and learn to draw better. And so I challenged myself on that trip to create an art journal and document the journey that way, and just make myself go through the practice of drawing. Instead of editing myself, instead of like stopping myself because I was like, I suck at this, to just keep going and trying. And it wasn't perfect, obviously. Like there was a couple days where I was like, I didn't even draw because I felt like it was so bad. But then as I kept going, I got better and better. And not that you even need to get better to do it. But I think going through that practice was really cool. And I'm really proud of myself for how things came out. And from September through December, it was really a black hole of time. Like you can see all of the vlogs from that period, but I was in my trauma-informed coaching certification, getting into busy season for the business. And I didn't even mention 2025 was the year that I let go of my chef side hustle. And I only did that in the summer months, but that was also letting go of, on average, $40,000 of revenue. So once again, my overall revenue for this year was lower than I had ever experienced. But it felt so different than looking back at my numbers in January last year, because looking at them this year, there are a few things that are different. The first is letting go of that side hustle created so much space for me to build things, for me to create new things, for me to have more space to play and travel, mental capacity, if that makes sense. I also invested more than I ever have in myself. And I guess a key detail is, looking at my numbers, I now had my enough number after last year and had my key baseline. And so from like a nervous system safety standpoint around money, I knew that I was okay. And that's why I think it's important to have that enough number. For someone like me who came from a low income household, who didn't have a lot of money growing up, who was kind of always in a scarcity mindset for a really long time, that mindset kind of stays with you even once you start making money, or at least for me it did. But numbers are numbers, and seeing my enough number on paper, and by enough, I'm not just talking about survival, I'm talking about your essentials for sure, but then also safety net, I'm talking about investments, I'm talking about enrichment, and creativity, but like enough, you know, not like the big dream number, and it's important to hold visions for that too, but enough. Like, what is enough? And that really helped a lot with my anxiety around letting go of the chef business and investing a lot more in myself, in my business this year. I keep this folded at the corner so that And so coming into 2026, I'm feeling like excited and hopeful. And yes, there is a lot that's uncertain. There's still some self-doubt, imposter syndrome, like all of that stuff. I think that stuff never really goes away. And despite the state of the world and all of the crazy shit going on out there, I feel really hopeful and excited for the things I'm building, and it does feel so aligned. And you know, if you've been following along and watched all the vlogs, like you'll kind of see this evolution happen. And like I said in my last video, I turned 38, which means I'm closer to 40 than I even am to 35, which is so crazy to me. But I also feel more me than I ever have. And I think I also just have a little bit of this sense of pride and confidence in what I'm doing. And I'm really starting to see that work for my clients too, which is really exciting. And I think the more women who are resourced, that is all part of healing the world too. And not saying we have to solve all the world's problems, but like, we do have some form of agency within ourselves, and it really does start here, and then it can ripple out. So if you're still here, thank you for sticking around with all of my rambling about 2025. I am truly excited for 2026 and the new energy that it brings. If you're watching this when it comes out and you want to join my January cohort for really visioning and planning and putting things into motion for the rest of the year, there's still time to join. I'll put a link below. And as always, thank you so much for being here. Happy New Year. I'm so excited for the things that we're all building together in 2026, and I will see you in the next video. So that